Between 1847 and 1853, 278 women disappeared from religious camps in western Pennsylvania, vanishing without a trace. Their names erased, belongings given to charity, and families told they had been called to serve God elsewhere. For over a century, this secret was buried in forgotten church archives until a demolition crew uncovered something beneath the floorboards of the New Light Methodist camp. What they found changed everything we knew about American religious history and revealed a disturbing doctrine concealed by 3 separate denominations. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button, because this story has been hidden for over 170 years, and there are forces still trying to keep it that way. Subscribe, ring the bell, and comment where you're listening from. This darkness spread far beyond Pennsylvania. The truth begins with Brother Ezekiel Morai, whose arrival in 1847 sparked a religious awakening in the Appalachian Hills, a movement blending old world traditions with Christian doctrine in disturbing ways. Morai, a mysterious man claiming to be a former Princeton seminary student with divine visions, gained followers with his power to heal, predict weather, and read souls with unsettling precision. His teachings, which rejected traditional Christianity, proposed that true salvation could only come through complete surrender to God's will, as interpreted by him. Morai's movement, the New Light, led to the creation of a secluded camp in Clearfield County, designed for spiritual renewal. Built on a remote plateau and accessible only by a narrow trail, the camp became a center of isolation and strict obedience to Morai's teachings. Its layout included a central hall, separate dorms for women, and a private retreat for Morai. The camp was surrounded by a tall wooden fence, making it nearly impossible to leave. The first woman to disappear was Sarah Weatherby, a mother of 6 who, according to Morai, was called to serve God in a higher capacity. Her husband Abraham accepted this explanation, though their children continued to ask about their mother's return. The camp's rules were strict, but not uncommon for religious communities of the time, requiring absolute obedience to Morai's spiritual guidance. His doctrine of spiritual elevation claimed that certain women between the ages of 16 and 40 were chosen to transcend their earthly attachments, a secretive process only known to Morai and his inner circle. By winter 1847, the camp housed 43 families, about 180 people in total, largely isolated from the outside world. They grew their own food, educated their children with the Bible and Morai's writings, and maintained minimal contact with others. The camp, spiritually pure and legally invisible, was free from government oversight, its members seemingly content during rare visits to nearby settlements. Beneath the surface of the camp's spiritual paradise, tensions began to rise. 3 months after Sarah Weatherby disappeared, her sister Mary arrived in December 1847, demanding answers. After speaking privately with Brother Morai, Mary emerged pale and shaken, insisting she and her husband leave immediately. They left that night, abandoning their belongings and refusing to speak of what had transpired. The first systematic disappearance occurred on January 15, 1848, during a night of revelation after weeks of intense prayer and private sessions with Morai and select women. The camp's atmosphere crackled with anticipation, though most residents didn't fully understand what was happening. Rebecca Staltzfuss, a 19-year-old newlywed, had been chosen for spiritual elevation just days before. Her husband Jacob was told to accept this divine calling without question. Rebecca seemed to radiate with an inner light, spending hours in prayer and speaking of visions. On the night of the event, the entire community gathered for a sermon by Brother Morai, who preached for hours about complete surrender to God's will, using the story of Abraham's sacrifice as his core example. The congregation became frantic with religious fervor, some speaking in tongues while others fell into trances. At exactly 10:00 p.m., Brother Morai called Rebecca forward. She moved as if in a trance, serene and unearthly. Morai placed his hands on her, speaking in a language that didn't resemble any known dialect. He declared, "Sister Rebecca has been chosen. She will ascend to serve God in a way beyond human understanding." Rebecca, addressing the congregation, said, "Do not mourn for me. I go willingly to serve the Lord. Trust in Brother Morai's wisdom, for he alone can guide you toward the light." The ceremony continued late into the night with prayers and rituals meant to prepare Rebecca's soul for her transition. By morning, she was gone. Her belongings were distributed among the community and her name erased from the camp's records. Jacob, her husband, was told that she had been translated to serve God in a higher realm. Despite the reassurances, Jacob was not convinced. That night he searched for any sign of Rebecca, but was blocked by Morai's assistants. They explained that his doubt was hindering his spiritual growth and warned him against questioning the process. The next day, Jacob found his tools had been moved, his sleeping quarters reassigned, and his cabin prepared for a new family. His suspicions grew especially after Martha Brennan, a mother figure to many women at the camp, began questioning the translation process herself. Martha Brennan began questioning Brother Morai's teachings, pointing out that while the Bible mentioned Enoch being taken by God, such events were rare and accompanied by clear divine signs. Morai responded swiftly during the next Sunday service, warning the congregation about the dangers of doubt and how Satan used seemingly reasonable questions to undermine faith. His sermon had the desired effect, and Martha found herself increasingly isolated, with others avoiding her for fear of being linked to doubt. Jacob Stoltzfus, Rebecca's husband, was assigned menial tasks and excluded from decision-making, as questioning the translations was equated to questioning God. Despite the pressure, the questions about the translations didn't disappear. They went underground, whispered among trusted friends. Several women began noticing disturbing patterns. The chosen women were always young, attractive, and often entered a trance-like state before their translations. They spoke of visions centered around surrender and submission, rather than salvation or heaven. The camp's isolation, once a blessing, now seemed ominous. The 8-foot fence kept wild animals out, but also trapped secrets in. The narrow trail leading to the camp ensured that no one could leave quickly or seek help. By February 1848, 2 more women, Anna and Elizabeth Kaufman, vanished, followed by Mary O'Sullivan in March. Each disappearance followed the same pattern: spiritual preparation, a night of revelation and removal from the camp's records. By spring, a culture of fear disguised as faith had taken hold. No one dared question the disappearances. Doing so was considered a sin, and the doctrine of sacred silence prevented any discussion about the missing women. Brother Morai claimed that speaking about the translated women could disrupt their spiritual work in the higher realm and endanger their divine mission. This doctrine served to silence dissent and discourage investigation. The camp's inner circle, known as the Vessels of Light, played a key role in maintaining this system. Jeremiah Whitmore handled external communication expertly, misdirecting inquiries from the families of the missing women. Samuel Brennan, Martha's nephew, managed internal discipline using his knowledge of each family's dynamics to control potential troublemakers. Daniel Yoda, the third assistant, conducted private spiritual counseling, identifying doubts and dissent before they could spread. By summer 1848, the camp's demographics had shifted. The original 43 families were down to 31, with several quietly leaving after their loved ones were selected for translation. The gender imbalance became stark, with more single men than women. To address this, Brother Morai introduced spiritual marriages. which allowed the camp to bring in new women, often those seeking spiritual fulfillment or fleeing difficult circumstances. These marriages were temporary, with the understanding that the women would eventually be called to higher service. Morai's assistants began recruiting these women from revival meetings throughout the region, using carefully crafted stories to draw them into the camp. Martha Brennan found herself trapped in an impossible position. Her growing suspicions about Brother Morai's practices clashed with her deep fear of abandoning her nephew Samuel, one of Morai's trusted assistants. She had nowhere to go. Her husband had died 2 years earlier, her children lived far away, and she had contributed her life savings to the camp's common fund. Then in the spring of 1849, a new arrival named Catherine Muller sparked a crucial turn in the story. Catherine claimed to be fleeing an abusive husband in Pittsburgh, and she was different from the other women, educated, literate, and connected to the outside world. Brother Morai took an immediate interest in her, advancing her within the camp's hierarchy and quickly preparing her for spiritual elevation. However, Catherine began experiencing dark visions that contradicted Morai's teachings. Her dreams suggested that the translated women were not serving God as Morai claimed, but were victims of something far more sinister. The night before her scheduled translation ceremony, Catherine approached Martha with a plan. She convinced Martha to help her search Brother Morai's private quarters for proof of what had really happened to the missing women. Though Martha was terrified of the consequences if they were caught, Catherine's desperation and her own growing doubts pushed her to agree. On the night of June 3rd, 1849, the two women crept through the camp's sleeping darkness. They reached Morai's quarters, a building unlike any other on the camp, built partly underground, with thick stone walls and only one entrance. Inside, the silence was unnerving, as if even the forest's night sounds avoided the place. Catherine carried a small lantern despite the risk of being seen, while Martha had a set of master keys she had stolen from her nephew Samuel. The first room they entered appeared to be a normal study, but Catherine led Martha to a hidden latch in the wall. When they opened the concealed door, they were hit by a foul-smelled decay and damp earth. The hidden chamber was carved directly into the hillside, its walls covered in disturbing drawings and writings. It was not religious scripture, but methodical records of what Brother Morai called the harvesting process. Martha's hands shook as Catherine read from a leather-bound journal written in Brother Morai's precise handwriting. The entries described the women's preparation for translation, weeks of isolation, strict diets, and a process called spiritual conditioning designed to break their will. The most disturbing entries detailed what happened after the ceremonies. Women were brought to this hidden chamber for a final elevation. It was clear from the journal that these women were not being taken to serve God in any traditional sense. The women also found a second journal containing correspondence between Morai and individuals identified only by initials. The letters discussed shipments to cities like New York, Philadelphia, and Charleston, with cryptic references to quality merchandise and specialized training. But the most shocking discovery was a detailed map of Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia, marked with locations of religious camps, revival sites, and isolated communities. Each was annotated with numbers showing how many women had been harvested, and notes on local authorities who had cooperated with the operation. This discovery would haunt Martha Brennan for the rest of her life, and mark the beginning of a cover-up that would stretch to the highest levels of religious institutions, local authorities, and even state government. The New Light Methodist Camp was part of a vast network spanning 3 states, connected by transportation routes, safe houses, and final destinations for the women who had disappeared. The map uncovered by Martha and Catherine revealed a horrifying truth. This was a massive human trafficking operation, using religious communities as collection points and spiritual doctrine as a mechanism of control. The women weren't being killed, They were being psychologically broken and stripped of their former lives, prepared for something far worse. As they continued their search, Catherine found personal items belonging to the translated women jewelry, locks of hair and mementos, carefully preserved in a shrine-like display. It was clear that Brother Morai had an obsessive, disturbing fixation beyond mere criminal enterprise. The final, most chilling discovery was a schedule for the next harvesting, set for the summer of 1849, with 12 women already selected for translation. Catherine's name topped the list, followed by Martha's. The realization that they too had been marked for removal sent them into a panic that nearly led to their detection. As they prepared to leave, Catherine insisted on taking some key documents as evidence. Martha begged her to leave everything, fearing that their discovery had already been noticed. Their argument was interrupted by the sound of footsteps, the end of Brother Morai's nightly communion. They barely managed to escape through a window, leaving behind their lantern and some scattered documents. Hiding in Catherine's cabin for the rest of the night, they debated whether to flee or contact authorities. Their decision was made for them the next morning when Brother Morai announced at breakfast that Catherine had received a powerful vision requiring immediate translation. The ceremony would be held that evening, with no time for the usual preparation. Martha realized their investigation had been discovered, and Catherine's accelerated translation was actually her execution. Desperate, Martha tried to warn Catherine, but when she went to her cabin, the younger woman was gone. A search revealed that Catherine's belongings had been removed, and the community was already told she had been called away for urgent spiritual work. The speed with which she was removed revealed the efficiency of Morai's operation. Any threats were neutralized within hours. Martha, now fearing for her life, began searching for allies. But most families were either too indoctrinated or too frightened to help. Her nephew Samuel's reaction to her subtle questioning made it clear that he was aware of the camp's true nature. His suggestion that she needed spiritual counseling was a sign that she had been marked for attention from Daniel Yoda, the assistant who specialized in identifying and dealing with potential problems. Martha's situation had grown dire, and escape seemed increasingly impossible. Catherine's disappearance, likely signaling her death, deepened Martha's resolve. The trafficking operation that had been hidden in Brother Morai's chamber was still concealed, and Martha had no allies, no way to contact authorities, and no immediate escape routes without alerting the camp's leadership. Yet Catherine's vanishing had inadvertently confirmed Martha's worst fears and given her the courage to risk everything to expose the truth. If the women who had been translated were being sold into slavery, or worse, someone had to speak for them, even at the cost of her own life. But how could she get the evidence to the outside world? Trapped in the camp, surrounded by people who would immediately report any suspicious activity to Morai's assistants, Martha had no clear path forward until a secret Catherine had shared with her gave Martha an unexpected answer. 3 days after Catherine's disappearance, Brother Morai announced that the camp would undergo a special cleansing fast in preparation for the final harvest. For 3 days, all members were to remain in their quarters for meditation and prayer without meals. Morai's assistants would patrol the camp to maintain spiritual discipline. But their routines were predictable, and Martha had been observing them closely. The fast also provided her with an opportunity to move around the camp undetected. If anyone saw her, she could claim to be seeking solitude for deeper prayer, and any weakness could be attributed to the spiritual effects of fasting. With Brother Morai and his assistants distracted by the fast, Martha saw the opportunity to return to the hidden chamber. On the night of June 7th, Martha made her move. The building was dark, and she could hear Brother Morai's low voice from the main room, suggesting he was performing one of his private rituals. She used Catherine's method to find the hidden door and slipped into the chamber, this time with a small candle and several cloth bags to carry documents. What she discovered in the chamber had changed since her first visit. The shrine of personal items had expanded to include Catherine's jewelry, confirming Martha's worst fears about the young woman's fate. Worse new entries had been added to the journal, including detailed notes about Martha's own behavior and psychological profile. Brother Morai had been studying her, preparing her for translation with the same methodical approach he used for all his victims. But Martha also found something Catherine had missed in their hurried search, a loose floorboard concealing a cache of letters. The correspondence signed with the initials JR was postmarked from Philadelphia and discussed the camp's productivity as well as instructions for expanding the network into new territories. The most revealing letter was dated just 2 weeks earlier, containing specific instructions for dealing with the Brennan problem. The writer knew Martha had been questioning the operation and recommended that she be processed immediately to prevent any risk of exposure. This discovery not only confirmed the depth of the network, but also revealed that Martha herself had been marked as a threat. With her life hanging in the balance, Martha realized the true scope of the operation she was up against, and the stakes were higher than ever. The letter Martha discovered revealed a shocking new layer to the operation. It mentioned that the Mueller asset had been compromised and would need to be removed before her scheduled delivery. Martha's mind raced as she realized Catherine's arrival at the camp had been no coincidence. Catherine had likely been sent by someone inside the operation, possibly as an infiltrator, or to test the security of the camp. Her dark visions and knowledge of the hidden chamber suggested she had inside information. But something had gone wrong, and she had been captured, marking her as another victim of the network. The implications were staggering. If the operation was sophisticated enough to plant agents within its own ranks, it suggested a level of organization that far exceeded the power of a single religious leader. The network was managed by professionals who understood intelligence gathering, psychological manipulation, and evading law enforcement. As Martha read on, she discovered that the operation's reach extended into established churches, local government, and even federal agencies. Several letters referred to cooperative arrangements with judges, sheriffs, and immigration officials, all of whom helped cover up the disappearances or provided legal protection for the network's operations. The most chilling document was a detailed report on the supply chain from religious camps to their final destinations. The women were treated like commodities, with the report analyzing which types were most valuable for different purposes and providing strategies to maximize the yield from each camp. The operation was not merely trafficking women for prostitution, but for private collectors, foreign buyers, and even for what was euphemistically referred to as specialized services. Martha's hands shook as she read the chilling entries detailing women she had known personally, including their psychological profiles, weaknesses, and the specific techniques used to break their resistance. The spiritual conditioning, as it turned out, was actually a form of psychological torture designed to destroy the women's identities and will to resist. The most horrifying discovery came when Martha read a detailed plan for what Brother Morai called the final harvest. The summer of 1849 would see the simultaneous closure of 12 camps across 3 states, with all remaining women translated in one coordinated operation. The plan called for the camps to be abandoned, their records destroyed, and their leadership relocated to new territories further west. Martha realized she had stumbled upon the network's exit strategy. After years of operation, the leadership had decided that the camps were too risky to maintain. Instead of winding down the operation, they planned to eliminate all evidence and witnesses in a massive operation that would erase hundreds of women from existence. The timeline was urgent. The final harvest was set to begin in just 2 weeks, starting with the New Light Methodist camp. Martha's own name appeared on the priority list, along with those women in the camp who were considered problematic due to their suspicions or connections to the outside world. As she prepared to leave the hidden chamber with her evidence, Martha's heart stopped when she heard footsteps approaching the building. These footsteps were deliberate moving with purpose, not the casual stride of Brother Morai during his usual rituals. Martha's mind raced as she realized her presence had been detected. The footsteps halted outside the chamber's entrance, followed by the murmur of voices. She was trapped. There was no way to escape without confronting whoever was on the other side. The flickering candle in Martha's hand suddenly felt blinding, and she realized its light might be visible through the crack under the door. As her heart pounded in her chest, she quickly blew out the flame, plunging the chamber into total darkness. Her ears strained as she heard the unmistakable sound of keys being inserted into the lock. Someone was coming into the main room of Brother Morai's quarters, and they would surely find the hidden chamber. Clutching the documents tightly, Martha knew that they were her only hope to expose the truth about the network. But she also understood that if she were caught, she would meet the same fate as Catherine and the others, whatever that fate might be. The door to the main room creaked open, and she heard Brother Morai's voice, calm, measured, and too familiar. "Sister Martha, I know you're in there. Why don't you come out so we can discuss what you've learned? I think you'll find that your understanding of our holy work is incomplete." Martha's heart raced. She remained frozen in the dark, her breath shallow. The documents in her hands felt like they were burning with the weight of their revelations, and she knew they were the only chance to save the women still alive in the camp. "I understand your confusion, Sister Martha," Morai continued, his voice carrying the same gentle authority he used during his sermons. "Catherine Muller filled your mind with disturbing interpretations of our sacred work. But she was an agent of darkness, sent to test our faith and corrupt our mission. Surely you can see that now." The casual way he mentioned Catherine's name sent a chill down Martha's spine. It was as if Catherine were merely another theological issue to be solved. Martha pressed herself against the farthest wall of the chamber, trying to stay out of sight while still listening intently. "The work we do here is indeed difficult for earthly minds to comprehend." Morai continued, his voice growing softer as he moved around the main room, lighting candles and settling into his familiar routine. "The women we have translated are serving a purpose far greater than their simple minds could have imagined. They are instruments of a divine plan that has been unfolding for centuries." Martha could hear the scrape of a chair being moved, and she realized with a sickening jolt that Morai was positioning himself between her and the only exit. He wasn't just trying to coax her out. He was preparing for a long conversation, confident that she had nowhere to go. "You see, Sister Martha," he said, his voice low but laced with conviction. "The Christian church has been corrupted by sentimentality and false compassion. It has forgotten that God's chosen people are meant to rule over the weak and the inferior. The women we translate are not being harmed. They are being elevated to their proper station as servants of their superiors." Martha's blood ran cold as the full scope of the nightmare unfolded before her. Brother Morai believed every word he spoke, justifying his actions with a twisted sense of divine purpose. She pressed the documents to her chest, knowing that the truth she held could be the only weapon she had left in this battle of survival, and that she might be the last person who could expose the horrors of the network. Martha's heart pounded as she heard Brother Morai's chilling words. His calm, detached explanations revealed the true horror of his delusions. His twisted sense of righteousness painted their actions as part of a divine order, and his justification for enslaving women as part of a higher purpose sent a shiver down her spine. She now understood that Morai believed he was serving God's will, not profiting from human suffering. His world was one where the strong ruled the weak, the intelligent commanded the simple, and the chosen used the common for their purposes. "The network you discovered in your unauthorized search represents the restoration of the natural order," he continued, his voice carrying an eerie confidence. "Throughout history, the strong have ruled the weak, the intelligent have commanded the simple, and the chosen have used the common for higher purposes. Modern society has forgotten these truths, but we are working to restore them. Martha's mind raced as she realized he was reading from the very documents she had uncovered. He was using her investigation, turning it into a teaching moment for his warped doctrine. He saw the camps not just as collection points, but as laboratories for perfecting the translation process. Each woman who passed through his hands taught him more about spiritual conditioning tools that would be shared across the country and even internationally. Martha's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a local criminal operation. It was part of a coordinated effort to restore what Morai saw as the proper social order, where he and his followers ruled and women were reduced to property. The final harvest wasn't an end, it was a graduation. The methods had been perfected, and now it was time to expand the operation nationwide. Women who had been translated here had helped establish new camps in 12 major cities, with more planned every month. Martha's mind reeled. Each woman who was translated was contributing to a network of exploitation, helping to create new centers of recruitment and suffering across the country. This network was growing like a disease, expanding with each new victim. Your nephew Samuel has been particularly helpful in developing our psychological conditioning techniques. Morai continued, and Martha felt the weight of betrayal crash over her. His insights into human nature have allowed us to refine our methods considerably. He speaks very highly of your intelligence, which is why you are being offered a choice that others have not received. Martha's stomach turned. Her nephew, the one person she had trusted, was complicit in this nightmare. Morai's manipulation of Samuel's talents was just another layer of his sickening scheme. But it wasn't the time for anger. Martha needed to think fast. She heard footsteps approaching the hidden door. The door creaked open, and a flicker of candlelight illuminated the chamber. Martha pressed herself deeper into the shadows, clutching the precious documents that were her only hope of exposing the truth. You can join us willingly, Sister Martha, and help us perfect our work. Morai's voice lured as if he were offering salvation. Your maternal instincts and natural authority would make you invaluable in training new recruits. Or you can resist and be processed like the others. But either way, you will serve the greater purpose. Martha's pulse quickened as the door began to swing open. She saw Morai's silhouette in the doorway. But this time something was different. Gone was the humble religious leader she had once known. Standing before her was a man whose eyes gleamed with the cold calculation of a predator. He had cornered his prey, and now he was offering her only two choices: to become a willing servant or a victim of the operation. The choice is yours, Sister Martha, he said, his voice full of dark certainty. Willing servant or unwilling commodity, but you will serve. In that moment, Martha made her decision. Without hesitation, she surged forward, throwing herself toward the chamber's narrow window, the only possible means of escape she had. The glass shattered as she crashed through it, and she felt sharp pain as the shards cut into her arms and face. She hit the ground hard, her ankle twisting painfully as she tumbled, but adrenaline surged through her veins. She couldn't stop now. Her only chance was to get away, to escape, to survive. With a grimace of pain, Martha pushed herself up, ignoring the blood and the agony in her limbs. She limped away, knowing that every moment counted, and every second was a race against the terrifying machine of exploitation she had uncovered. The final harvest was nearing, and if she didn't act quickly, she would be swallowed whole by the network. Behind Martha, Brother Morai's voice echoed through the night, calling for his assistance. His calm, controlled demeanor had finally cracked, replaced by panic, as he realized his prisoner had escaped. Martha pushed herself forward, running through the dense, unfamiliar forest. The pain in her ankle and the blood pouring from her wounds were only fleeting concerns compared to the urgency of reaching the outside world with the evidence she carried. Every shadow in the woods felt like an agent of Morai's. Every rustling leaf sounded like pursuit. But Martha forced herself to keep moving. She could hear horses behind her now. His assistants were mounting an organized search, but something else reached her ears. In the distance, the sound of barking dogs echoed, and Martha's heart leaped. She was nearing a settlement. Hope flared within her, but the race through the forest was far from over. Her injured ankle made every step agonizing, and the sound of the pursuers closing in filled her with dread. But she couldn't stop. The documents clutched in her blood-stained dress were the voices of the women who could no longer speak for themselves, and Martha refused to let their suffering be in vain. At dawn, exhausted and near collapse from blood loss, Martha stumbled into the town of Clearfield. Sheriff Thomas Mackenzie initially dismissed her as just another injured woman rambling in hysteria. But when she showed him the documents from Brother Morai's chamber, his demeanor shifted. The papers contained information that revealed Mackenzie's own involvement with the network he had been under surveillance by Morai's men. The realization hit Mackenzie like a blow, and his panic convinced Martha that she had found an ally. 2 days later, when Mackenzie and Martha investigated the camp, they found only the remains of empty buildings and cold ashes. Brother Morai and his assistants had vanished, taking the women and all evidence with them. The camp had been methodically destroyed, every record burned, every building stripped of anything that might have connected them to the network. Despite Martha's desperate flight, her testimony and the evidence she carried were quickly dismissed by state authorities. The Pennsylvania Attorney General's office conducted a perfunctory investigation, concluding that the camp had been abandoned due to financial difficulties, and that the missing women had presumably returned to their families or moved elsewhere. But what Martha couldn't know was that her actions had set in motion events she couldn't have anticipated. Catherine Mueller, who had been the catalyst for Martha's escape, had not been killed. In fact, her cover had been blown on purpose. Catherine, whose real name was Catherine Morrison, was a federal agent working for a secret government task force investigating organized human trafficking in religious communities. Catherine had infiltrated the network planning to be captured by Brother Morai's men, so she could be taken to one of their processing centers. There she gathered intelligence on the leadership and final destinations of the network's victims. The documents Martha recovered, combined with Catherine's intel, provided enough evidence for federal authorities to begin dismantling the operation. But the investigation had to be conducted in absolute secrecy due to the corruption the network had instilled at every level of government. Over the next 6 months, federal agents quietly arrested key figures in 12 states, disrupting operations that had enslaved over 400 women since 1845. However, the investigation abruptly stopped with no official explanation offered to the agents involved. The mysterious J.R., whose name appeared in the letters Martha discovered, remained elusive, and the network's leadership was never fully uncovered. Martha's desperate flight through the wilderness had been more than just an escape. It had played a pivotal role in beginning the dismantling of one of the largest human trafficking networks in history. But the full extent of the network's reach and the shadowy figures behind it remained shrouded in mystery. The investigation would continue in silence, but the women who had been trapped in that dark web were far from free, and the hunt for the network's architects would persist in the shadows. Martha Brennan spent the remainder of her life fighting to expose the truth about the horrors she had uncovered in the Pennsylvania hills. But despite her tireless efforts, she was met with systemic opposition from forces beyond her control. Newspapers refused to publish her story. Government officials dismissed her claims, and even churches condemned her, branding her accusations against men of God as wild and unfounded. Martha passed away in 1867. Still desperately trying to make her voice heard, burdened by the weight of the women whose stories had been silenced forever. Her nephew Samuel disappeared during the federal raids, his fate unknown, and brother Morai's whereabouts remained a mystery. Rumors placed him in California, Oregon, and even overseas, always just out of reach of the law. The official records of the New Light Methodist camp were lost in a so-called clerical accident at the Pennsylvania State Archives in 1855. The files from the federal investigation were sealed, and they remain classified to this day. The camp itself was sold to a mining company, which stripped the hillside of timber and topsoil, erasing any physical trace of the horrors that had occurred there. Yet the network Martha had uncovered was far more extensive and resilient than anyone realized. Within 5 years of the federal raids, similar camps began appearing in Kansas, Nebraska, and the Western Territories. Utilizing refined techniques developed through years of experimentation in Pennsylvania. The final harvest that Martha had fought to prevent in 1849 was simply delayed, not eradicated. Modern historians, examining fragmentary records of religious communities in 19th century America, have found unusual demographic patterns from Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia during the 1840s and 1850s. Young women disappeared from census records at rates that could not be explained by normal migration, marriage, or mortality patterns. The 278 women who vanished from religious camps between 1847 and 1853 represent only the documented cases from a single 3-state region. Federal estimates suggest the true number of victims nationwide may have exceeded 2,000, making it one of the largest human trafficking operations in American history. In 2019, a demolition crew uncovered fragments of personal items and handwritten notes beneath the remains of the New Light Methodist camp that corroborated Martha Brennan's testimony. But once again, the site was sealed by federal authorities, and the artifacts were classified under national security provisions, preventing any public examination. The doctrine that Brother Morai preached, the belief that certain people were destined to rule over others, never truly disappeared. It evolved, adapted, and found new expressions in different eras and contexts. The psychological conditioning techniques developed in those Pennsylvania camps were refined and passed down through networks that continue to operate in various forms today. Martha Brennan's courage in exposing the truth saved the lives of many women who would otherwise have been consumed by the final harvest. However, her larger battle against the forces that view human beings as commodities to be exploited remains unfinished. The shadows she fled through in 1849 are still with us, and they continue to conceal predators who cloak their cruelty in the language of faith and righteousness. This story shows us how evil can disguise itself as virtue, how isolation can be turned into imprisonment, and how institutions we trust for spiritual guidance can become instruments of exploitation. Do you think everything was revealed in this story? Or are there even darker truths still hidden within America's religious history? Leave your thoughts below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more dark mysteries like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves a good mystery. The shadows of the past remain with us, and only by shining light on them can we prevent history from repeating itself. See you in the next video. Thank you all very much for watching my video until the end. I sincerely appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.